I have a little bit of a disclaimer before I get into this. That is, I have just had a pretty rough weekend, and I didn't really time this right because I have a talk all about movement, which right now I'm not moving so hot. So we're going to get into this. We'll see how it goes. But movement and why it's good. So for like pretty much up until the past, I don't know, modern times, right? Mobility. If you didn't have mobility, you didn't live, right? So mobility is life. We're at a much better point in time now where we've got disability access, wheelchairs, handicapped, all sorts of accessibility. So mobility isn't life anymore, but it's still very, very important. So my talk is kind of just around more on the strength movement side. I do spend quite a bit of my off working hours kind of studying this stuff, working with this stuff. So it just kind of seemed like the proper thing for me to talk about here. So I'm going to start with talking about what is strength. A lot of people have a lot of different definitions. Definition I usually go by, strict strength, is your ability to influence or exert influence over your surroundings, right? So I'm standing here. Yes, I do need I do need some strength to be able to stand against the force of gravity, right? But, if I push against this and I can't move this, that's not strength, right? Strength is the ability to be able to actually influence that and move this, the cart, okay? So that's kind of my definition of strength and where I'm going to be starting from here. Another couple of disclaimers. I'm not a doctor. I'm not an expert. Like I said, I do spend a lot of time doing this stuff, but by all means, if you don't want to listen to what I'm saying, totally okay with that. And if you disagree with anything I say, I won't hold it against you, and in fact, I would encourage the conversation. Finally, a lot of this stuff does vary person to person, bone structure, genetics, right? A lot of this just is different for everybody, right? So if I make a generalization, a sweeping statement, and you feel offended or you feel like it doesn't apply to you, it's very possible that it doesn't apply to you. A couple quick grinds my gears. Our food pyramid, right? This is just kind of, I'm going to get on a soapbox for a second just to say this. This is a ridiculous food pyramid. And if for no other reason, you should not listen at all to the food pyramids that come out of the government. Why? Talk isn't about nutrition, but the food pyramid, right? Because who designs the food pyramid? It's the USDA, a lobby group for the Agriculture Department of the United States, right? So you have the suppliers telling you what to eat. Take that with a grain of salt. Think about that for a second, okay? I would very much strongly advise, if you're going to think about what to eat, food pyramids, all that stuff, go to somebody who actually is a doctor that knows what they're talking about, that can design you a nutrition program. Don't go to somebody that lobbies and says, hey, I've got people making an excess amount of grain, or I've got corn, or I've got this, or I've got that, right? We're selling it, you should buy it and eat it, it's good for you, okay? So that's one of my biggest, just when you talk about health and movement and fitness and everything like that, one of the biggest problems we get into is inflammation, and one of the biggest problems with inflammation is the food we eat. So we have 3 basic forms of movement, okay? Lifting something up, standing yourself up with weight, right? Just kind of moving, and then pressing something, okay? So the major movers here, right? Lifting something up, my lower body, more or less, or my back. Standing something up, again, lower body, but more of the frontal plane, so my quads, not necessarily my hamstrings or my back. And pressing something would be primarily with my arms, my chest, my shoulders, okay? And then a quick question, maybe somebody knows, what is the strongest muscle group in the body? Anybody at all? Legs. Legs, primarily? Nope. It's actually your glutes, your hips. So your hips are the major mover in your body. So whenever you talk about a strength movement, whether it is a press, whether it is a squat or a standing motion or a lifting motion, right? Everything always starts from the hips. And it's an extension from that. That is your biggest, strongest mover in your body. So hips, hips, hips. Now, when we talk about movement, right, mobility, the biggest, most important thing, right, is protect your spine. Your spine is your mobility, okay? Obviously, your spinal cord passes all of the nervous system information throughout your body. Very, very important. Your spine is there to protect your spinal cord and to provide you some level of 360 degrees of movement. So now we get into what are the core muscles, right? The core muscles protect the spine. So we have layers upon layers upon layers of protecting your spinal cord. For a broad definition of your core, right? I know there's a really popular definition, my core is my abs. That's wrong, okay? Your core is your abs, your back. It even goes up into your clavicle, down to your hips, okay? Pretty much everything that you could kind of say your trunk, that's more in line with what your actual core is, okay? So exclude your arms, your limbs, and much better definition. A strong core, okay, has nothing to do with being able to do 1,000 sit-ups. Nothing at all. In fact, sit-ups are a terrible, terrible movement. A strong core is one that keeps the spine controlled, again, strength, when external forces are applied. So let's say that anybody who's familiar with a plank position, right? You're not moving at all. If you're in a plank, you're in a static hold for a long period of time. A plank will give you a very, very strong core, right? It's going to protect your spine and protect your mobility, right? And it's going to probably be one of the better movements that you can do. And there's variations on those types of movements where you have more of a static hold, but you're not actually forcing your spine into bad positions. So I do have some comments down here: crunches, sit-ups, cartilage destroyers. What's wrong with a sit-up? What's wrong with the crunch? A couple things. Your spine isn't really all that fantastic at that motion, right? That crunching sit-up motion is not all that good. The other major problem with that movement is if you think about the way that the spine works, you have a couple discs, right? Or a bunch of discs, and in between, you have a bunch of bones, right? Vertebra. In between those vertebrae, you have little cartilage discs, okay? You can kind of think of those, I don't know, think of them just like little gel sacks, okay, for lack of a better description. If you're always forcing them in the same movement, so if you've got your vertebra and you're always pushing them in one direction and you've got this gel sac, you're going to be squeezing that gel sac out the other direction, right? If you're always doing that in one direction, that the cartilage between your vertebra is going to get forced into that pushed out position in one direction. So you'll see a lot of people are hunched over like this a lot, right? That's because you've trained your spine. This is a proper position, right? That's not a proper position. That's a proper position. Okay, so probably a lot of there's a much better core strength movements than you can do for, yeah, I know, right? Now we're all thinking about posture, right? Shoulders back and down, ribs tight. But when we're talking about going into a strong safety core, right? Highly advised, stay away from the crunches, stay away from the sit-ups. And the only reason I really bring this up is because with every single movement we do, you need to have a strong core. You need to protect your spine. So we'll start with lifting. And pretty much for the rest of the talk, I'm just going to be talking about what these movements are, how to stay safe during these movements, and how to exert the most strength and the most force, okay? So always, probably number one you're going to see is straight back, right? What I mean by that is as soon as you start rounding out your back under load, you probably have heard this before, lift with your legs, not with your back, right? Because as soon as you start lifting here and you try to exert a lot of weight up with your back, that's how you snap your spine, okay? That's how you pull a disc. That's how you really, really hurt yourself and end your mobility. You can recover from that, but you'll never, it's one of those like life-changing situations, right? Going along with the straight back, a neutral neck, right? So the spine doesn't start at my shoulders. My spine starts up in my head, right? So when I say neutral neck, it's kind of keeping that same idea in line, right? I want to keep a straight back. I want to keep a straight neck. We call it a neutral neck because sometimes you think, well, that's kind of straight, that's kind of straight, right? This is just straight up and down. It's called neutral. So again, for lifting, we want to talk about a power position, okay? So my feet underneath my hips is going to be the strongest I'm going to be. And the reason for that is because if you think just about the physics of the situation, if I'm pushing, if I'm lifting something, right, and my feet are way out to the side, I have a lot of my force is exerting sideways, right? When I press that way, right, it's pushing me that way. So the more that my feet are together and directly underneath me, okay, we say underneath our hips just to keep a nice straight line. But the more that my feet are underneath me, the more force that I'm pushing straight into the ground. And that's going to make me stronger, okay? So what are we talking about so far? From the top of my head, these first three, from the top of my head down to my feet, straight line, right? Nice and simple. Shoulders low and tight. You'll often hear, if you get into kind of active strength work, you'll hear people say keep active shoulders. Really what we're saying is you want to keep your shoulders back, right? Which is the complete opposite of what most of us do here, sitting at desks all day with our awesome posture, right? I'm 100% guilty of sitting here like this all day. But shoulders low and tight, meaning back and then down, okay? That's, if you're talking about a good, strong posture, that's the posture you want to be in all the time, right? I don't want to be hunched up here. I want nice and back and then down. The other way you can think about that is just push your chest out, right? So there's a lot of these just really simple tips. And finally, when you're lifting, use your hips, okay? Again, say lift with your legs. Really what that's saying is lift with your hips. But a lot of times you can't immediately start with the hips, right? So the biggest lift that you can do is a deadlift, which is just taking something from a resting position on the ground, and pretty much getting it up to your hips, right? So the major mover there is your hips, but I can't actually start if I'm starting with my weight with all the way down there. My hips only go down so far, right? So you're starting with your legs. That's why we say lift with your legs. I get up to a point where I can use my hips, and then I'm going to use my hips the rest of the way. For my standing motion, 1, 2, 3, again, we're talking now about keeping everything straight. You get down to 3, feet underneath the shoulders, okay? This will go in line with number 6, and I'll probably should have ordered those a little bit better, but we'll talk about those for a second. So standing, right? I didn't want to say squatting because the word squatting, you have doctors saying don't squat below parallel, doctors saying don't do this, don't do that. Personally, I think if you're not going below parallel, I don't understand how you stand up off the ground, right? If you're sitting, if you're here, right? Sorry for the camera, but if I'm here, how do I get up off the ground if I don't squat below parallel? Okay, so I have to stand, I'm below parallel, and I stand up, right? It's a natural motion. I'm going to, at some point, have an awesome little picture that I love using about a baby squatting, and it's awesome, it's cute. But feet underneath the shoulders and knees out. So the reason we say this is because when you're squatting, right, when you're standing up, when you're in that low position, the whole point is to open up your hip girdle, okay? So I can't squat on my legs. I have to squat between my legs, okay? So when I get down all the way into a squat, and this is the point where it's been a rough weekend, bear with me. But if my feet are underneath my shoulders, right, if they're here and I come down, I really, it starts getting hard to go much lower than that. I'm pretty much stuck here. But if I have my feet out to the side, right, at this point, I'm doing a couple things, right? I'm actually opening up my hips, and I'm allowing myself to drop further down between my legs. So when I get into a low squat, I can go much lower, much easier, right? With the knees out, I'm doing a couple things there. The number one reason most doctors will say don't squat below parallel is to save your knees, right? You do have a lot of shear force that you put on your knees when you start going down below parallel. Now, the issue with that is more of kind of where your knees are in line with your legs, right? Your knees should pretty much always be tracking over your toes, okay? So when we say knees out, I'm not saying that your foot should be this way and your knees should be like all the way twisted out. You just tore your ACL, have a good life, right? We're saying track your knees over your toes, okay? So when you start talking about that, what we're saying then is, right, everything's always straight. My bones are made to be more or less in a straight line, and again, your bone structure may be different, but more or less everybody's bone structures are made to line up, right? Your knee is meant to bend, right, to hinge this way. It's not meant to hinge sideways. And finally, with the knees out, one of the other really important things that gets you is it gets you some external rotation. So besides letting you squat down lower because you're squatting between your legs as opposed to over your legs, it actually also brings into play another big set of, or not big set, but some strong muscle groups, your hip adductors, and bringing more of your glutes into play on that squat. So again, we're talking about strength, we're talking about exerting force on the external world, right? The more muscles we can bring into play, the better we are, okay? So feet underneath the shoulders, knees out, we get lower, we get stronger. Weight on the heels. This starts getting important when we talk about saving our knees. So the more I come forward over my toes, right, I have two problems. One, if I do have any weighted load on my body, I'm now off balance, right? We're made to be standing upright, right? I can stand on my heels. My legs may get a little tired after a while, but I can stand upright forever, right? If I'm on my toes, I'm now at this point where I'm unstable. I'm constantly shifting my weight, making sure that I'm upright. I'm doing a lot more work as opposed to my weight goes straight down to the ground. So when I'm weight on my heels, right, that load, as much as possible, goes straight into the ground. As soon as I start getting on my toes, I now have to adjust for that. And let's say I get too far forward, worst case, right, you have some weight on your back, right, you will have to ditch that weight. You will get so far off balance that you actually put yourself into a dangerous situation. Now you're either bending your back, something bad is going to happen. Final talking point, vertical torso. Again, this goes back to straight back. But when we're talking about standing movements, right, if I'm here and I'm trying to stand up like that, I still have to get upright, okay? That's going to be putting a lot of pressure on my back. I'm leveraging out a lot of weight over my lower back, and that's how you end up pulling your back out. You may not slip a disc, you may not permanently hurt yourself, but you're going to be sore for a while, right? So keeping that vertical torso, when you're able to get down into a squat and still be upright, you're in a much better position, okay? So a stronger position. Babies can do it. So, right, upright torso, neutral position on the neck, strong lumbar, crease of hips below parallel, weight on the heels, feet shoulder width, knees tracking over but not beyond the toes. Pretty much all the talking points that I was just talking about, this is by far, right, we learn how to do this from birth, right? We get in the way of our own movement as we get older because our brains get bigger, we think we know better, right? Somebody tells us, no, that's not the way to do it. You're supposed to do it someplace else, some other way. I don't believe that. If that's a natural picture, that's how babies get up. That's how they stand. So if they're doing it that way with nobody telling them to do it differently, they're just listening to their bodies. So why not? Finally, the final movement, pressing. So there's a lot of presses. People generally like to do the bench press. Cool. I'm happy for you. I'm going to talk about overhead pressing because it's kind of a more common movement if we're talking about actually having to move weight around. I'm not often lying on my back. So the first thing here, right, obviously tight core. Ribs are drawn down into the belly button into the spine. Really what that looks like is I'm just standing up here where my back might be slightly convex, I think the word is, to I want to go into a little bit of a concave position, okay? And again, this just ties back into keeping my back straight. So if I'm here, as soon as I start pressing overhead, I want to tighten everything down this way. And what that stops me from doing is arching my back really far back like that and putting all that load on my back, right? So again, saving my back, saving my spine, tight core, strong core. You always want your elbows in front of the object you're lifting. So I want to be lifting here, right? This is a good lifting position. Depending on what movement you're doing, you might even want to get all the way up, but you never want to be here. Because if you're here, you're pressing out. And again, it comes back to balance. If I'm pressing out, that means that I'm probably getting off balance. It's taking a lot more work. I'm not going to be as strong, okay? And finally, also, we want a power position here. So feet underneath the hips, going to be as strong as possible. Put as much force straight down into the ground as we can. So that's the biggest points on presses. Common misconceptions. So these go back to my disclaimers, okay? These are my opinions. I happen to think my opinions are right. I usually do, but your mileage may vary. Stretching before workouts. Can I raise of hands? Good? Good? I disagree with you all. Stretching after workouts, good or bad? Good? I agree with you all. Okay. Stretching before workouts actually has been shown in the past couple years. There's been some studies that show that stretching before a workout, and by stretching I mean a static stretch as opposed to a dynamic movement. So static stretching, holding a pose longer than 30 seconds or so before a strength or movement-based workout, right, an intense workout, actually lengthens the muscle fibers, making them less powerful and more prone to tearing, right? So if you're looking at having a strength workout, right, those are probably the worst things that could happen, right? You're not only going to be not as strong, but more likely to hurt yourself. It's not very good. And finally, lifting heavy, good or bad. And this one, I'm going to be sexist for a second. I'm sorry. The biggest problem or the guys will always usually say like, oh yeah, we love lifting heavy. It's our thing. It's what we do, right? Girls are always like, I don't want to get big. Muscles make me big. Lifting heavy is always a good thing. Okay, again, we exist to influence our world, right? If you're not doing that, what are you doing, right? So lifting heavy, being able to influence the world more, carrying a baby longer, right? Whatever it is, in whatever situation, whatever your gender, it's always a good thing to be able to handle more weight beyond just, you know, I can stand here for a while, right? It's always a good thing. When you start talking about like the negative connotations with lifting heavy, I don't want to get bigger, I don't want to get bulky, these things, I will always tell you it's your nutrition. It's always 100% nutrition. Your body physique will always go back to 80, 85%. How are you eating? What is your diet? And, you know, that is a completely different topic. That is a hot topic for everybody in the world. Let's leave that one alone. Common misconceptions, part 2. I'm almost done. When we get older, we have to stop lifting. I think that is one of the worst things that kind of we as like an American society kind of have gotten towards. You know, oh, I'm getting older. It takes me longer to recover. I can't do this anymore. I can't do that anymore. The fact of the matter is I've actually seen personally people go from not being able to step up a 2-inch ledge, right, because they have so little mobility, to being able to do a 10-inch jump. Okay, so, and that's, how old was she? This particular lady, I think, was in her 80s. Okay, so this is something we lose over time when we don't use it, right? You don't use it, you lose it. Mobility is crucial, right? So lifting, to me, goes hand in hand with mobility, right? Yes, you do need more recovery time. Yes, you do need to, I'm almost done, yeah. You do need to like be careful of that, but we don't have to stop. In fact, I would encourage you to keep going. She's doing it. All right, and that's it. I'm done. So